Dark Magic, Chapter 1. Baby's blood? That's what it says. Mix in baby's blood and use that to mark the pentagram. There were 6 of them, and Claudia looked from face to face, waiting for someone to say that this was a ridiculous idea. She could, she supposed, have said it herself, but it was not as if anybody would have listened. Nobody ever listens to the magician's beautiful assistant. In fairness, they didn't exactly rush to agree with the plan either. When Jerry spoke, he had the decency to sound embarrassed. Does it have to be a human baby? Jerry's role in their conjuring show was to do the tricks that appealed mainly to children. It brought in family audiences, but the other magicians secretly, or to be honest, not that secretly, despised him. Still, Claudia thought that 1 or 2 might have taken his side here, but Daniel didn't allow time for any of them to join Jerry in questioning his plan. It's true that it doesn't specify human. Daniel smiled. It was an unconvincing smile, and Claudia thought he did it mainly to show off his teeth. They were quite startlingly white, though marred, in her opinion, by rather overdeveloped canines. But human seems fairly clear from the context. Could we try it with something else first? Daniel's smile vanished. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. Where there had been a big, white smile, all you noticed now was a very square jaw and full but rather sulky lips. And if you raised your eyes to his, something about his irises that made you look away again very quickly. It's hardly as if the other ingredients were easily come by. We don't want to mess this up and have to do it again. They were quiet at that. Claudia had the impression that they were all thinking of different things. She reckoned they would say the worst was the virgin's tears. Despite all the tired old jokes, finding a virgin had been the easy bit. It was keeping her crying for long enough to collect a vial of tears that had been wearing on their nerves. After a pause long enough for all of them to remember details they would rather have forgotten, Daniel spoke again. Baby's blood, then. There was an uncomfortable nodding of heads. How much blood are we talking about? That was Tor, almost certainly not his real name, but there was something about the way he looked at you if you questioned him, which discouraged you from asking twice. He was an illusionist, constantly fretting about the mechanical details of his act. And what about clotting? Are we going to add an anti-clotting agent? Claudia remembered an illusion that involved an arm being cut off. Tor had been dissatisfied with the stage blood most magicians used, and had experimented with various concoctions of his own. Claudia had never inquired as to what they were, but one had clotted and spoiled the act, and Tor had been out of sorts for a week. The pentagram doesn't have to be very big. Daniel's smile was back, a little tense, it seemed to Claudia, as if he was realizing they might need more reassurance than he could offer. Think of what a child would use finger painting. Everybody tried to imagine this, but they were clearly struggling. Claudia doubted if they had ever supervised a child finger painting in their lives. Reluctantly, she contributed an answer. 2 or 3 teaspoonfuls should be enough. There was enthusiastic nodding. This was a question that involved children, and something close to a recipe. This was an area where a magician's beautiful assistant could legitimately offer an opinion. And, they all realized, a very helpful opinion. 2 or 3 tablespoons wasn't that much. It wasn't as if they were going to have to kill anyone. Right, said Daniel. That's agreed then. There is absolutely no justice. The cast of maestros of magic were gathered around the table in their tour bus, looking at a poster that Sylvie, mistress of magic and mother hen to this collection, had held down on the table with a selection of drinks glasses. She picked up her G&T and a corner curled up. It didn't matter. The message was all too clear, even missing the starburst at the top left, that told you that the sun proclaimed it the most astonishing magical performance of your lives. The Carnival of Conjurers is a naff title for a show. Edmund was a mind reader, and rather resented the suggestion that his wasn't proper magic, requiring, as far as the audience knew, no sleight of hand or ability to cut and restore ropes. Conjuring, he thought, had had its day.
Naff or not, they've sold out the Royalty Theatre for 3 months.
Sylvie took another healthy swig from her G&T.
And if we are ever going to get off this tour bus and into a West End theatre, they are our competition.
What I don't understand is how they are so good all of a sudden. Graham's full lips, which could look surprisingly sexy when he welcomed volunteers onto the stage, were pursed into something suspiciously close to a pout, but he had a fair point. The magicians who made up the Carnival of Conjurers had been on the circuit for years. They played working men's clubs and seaside towns in the season, and, if life was being particularly good to them, the occasional one-night stand at a provincial theatre far enough from London to have difficulty in booking anything better. It was, everybody on the bus knew, pretty much par for the course for magicians nowadays. There was money and fame on TV, but the audience for live magic performed by somebody not already famous on the box was a dwindling one. And the Conjurers, currently enjoying a sell-out West End run, had been nothing special.
I mean,
Graham went on, I've seen Magical Mike go on stage with Chinese linking rings when he was Michael Davis and glad of the work, and his linking rings were terrible. Don't knock Chinese linking rings. Tony had been hunched in his seat, but now his skinny frame seemed to expand as he rose to defend the traditional magic that he thought of as his art. The capital A was somehow always in his voice when he talked about it. Tony liked old-fashioned magic with an emphasis on giant playing cards and trained doves, and heaven help you if you ever called them pigeons. Graham suspected, quite rightly in fact, that Tony had started on Chinese linking rings when his family gave him a magic set as a childhood Christmas present.
Linking rings were fine, but you have to jazz them up a bit. You can't do the old tricks. Now everybody can watch the tutorials on the internet.
There was a moment of silence, everyone nodding and thinking of the good old days when even the adults had no idea how the tricks were worked. Nowadays, 7-year-olds would march up to them after a show. "I know how you did that, mister." Keeping ahead of YouTube was a full-time job. Ian, Graham's partner in the Maestro's illusion act, leaned forward. He's not boring his audience with linking rings now. There was something about the way that he spoke that made the others wary. They glanced almost instinctively towards Sylvie. She picked up her glass, looked at it hopefully as if it might somehow have topped itself up, and replaced it on the table with a sigh.
"Okay, Ian, tell Mummy what you know."
"I went to see them." The others seemed to shudder, and Ian shrugged apologetically. "Sorry," he said. "No need to apologize," said Tony. Everybody nodded unconvincingly. "I thought I should, check out the opposition." There was more nodding. They were coming to terms with the idea. Going to see the Carnival of Conjurers wasn't disloyal. It was checking out the opposition.
"So,"
Sylvie's glass seemed somehow to have refilled itself, and she raised it toward Ian. "They're good," he said. "Freakily good. Good enough that the stuff they're doing is just not possible."
"For example?"
"He cuts a girl in two." "So," Graham's lips were definitely sneering, "we dropped that because it's too common." He gestured to an imaginary assistant beside him. "My beautiful assistant will get into this not at all suspicious-looking box and—" It wasn't his assistant. Everybody stared at Ian, girl from the audience. "Stooge!" They were all jeering. "Course it was a stooge. How naive can you get?" "It wasn't a stooge. She was with her boyfriend. I watched him watching her. The guy used a chainsaw. I thought the boyfriend was going to pass out." "Actors! Both of them!" Graham was almost snarling. "You can't have fallen for something so obvious."
"I went again. Different girl. She was with her parents. I think her mum fainted."
You couldn't make out what was said after that. They were all talking at once. Only Sylvie didn't speak until the hubbub had died down. Then she raised her glass to the light and squinted at the contents.
"Well," she said, "I think we're all going to have to pay a visit to the West End."